Okay, folks, Friday's lesson. All right, so settlement, we're flying through settlement here. We're looking at the impacts of migration now. So we looked at what migration was in our last lesson. Now we're looking at the impacts of that migration, okay? So you got your headings here. There's going to be a couple of notes to make, and we're going to do a little bit of reading as well, all right? So first thing is there's two key words here, and the second one you should know. The first one, assimilation. We looked at it the last day, and I just want to get a clear understanding of what it is. So it's the process by which migrants are expected to adapt and learn the cultures and ways of life in the country they've moved to. For example, learning the language. All right. Countries are trying to do this in some cases aggressively, okay, and in other cases they're trying to give migrants classes and stuff to try and help them assimilate. The idea is that if assimilation is successful, there'll be less hatred or anger between the native people and the immigrants. For example, in China, what they're trying to do now to a certain group of people is force them to take classes to learn Chinese culture and Chinese language, but actually they're just kind of large prisons, so it's not always a legal situation. Discrimination then, this is when a person or a group, usually a minority, are judged and treated differently due to an aspect of their identity, so race, religion, whatever, okay? So again, to be discriminated against, it happens to a lot of migrants, okay, or immigrants from local people, from the native people, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to jump over to New Wider World. We're going to read through page 25 and then read 30 and 31. Okay, there is a little assignment which I will go through as well, especially on these 2 pages, or these 3 pages will answer all of the homework, so please pay close attention to that. Alright, so we go to New Wider World right now. Okay, so what we're looking at is the negatives and positives of migration. We're going to look at general ones first, just loosely based about the UK, and then we're going to look at California as an example in America. So migration is a hugely interesting topic, and it's always being discussed and debated by governments and by people and groups and everybody, okay? So it's a very kind of fluid situation as well, because countries need immigrants, but then at the same time a lot of the local people don't particularly like immigrants, and there's a lot of falsehoods and stuff spread about people. We look at the Bahamas and migration in our lesson on Monday, okay, and again obviously working with the Haitians and stuff like that. So positives and negatives, okay. First things first, in the UK there's been a rapid number of immigrants, okay, and second of all, living conditions and work opportunities for several groups within the existing ethnic minorities are poor, okay. So there's already some issues around migration. There's too many people coming in, some would argue, and the conditions for those minorities is not great. So they're the two big issues that lead to our positives and negatives, okay. Now, as we said, immigrants have tended to locate with other members of their ethnic group in inner city areas within large urban areas. So what they tend to do is they'll kind of dominate or take over a small area. For example, the school I used to work in was in England, and it was an English school, but the neighborhood around it was completely Pakistani, Bangladeshi, okay, all Muslim families, all from that part of the world, and they'd come in, and over the years more and more families had arrived, and they all locate together, because then you start to see things like shops and butchers and little stores opening up from their own home country, because there's enough people, okay, to sustain those shops. Then you had mosques opening up, places of prayer and so on. So they slowly took over that whole area, okay. So this creates larger pockets of foreign people, and then this also reduces assimilation. If people can move there where they all spoke Urdu and stuff, the languages from Pakistan and Bangladesh, okay, Farsi and Urdu, then there's no need for them to learn English, so they don't, and then the local people get more and more angry, so it starts to build this conflict, okay. Within these areas, ethnic groups that share a similar religion, language, diet, social organisations and culture tend to congregate together. Okay, so there's some examples here in London about Jamaicans in Brixton and so on, Sikhs in Southall. Alright, so this does happen. So they tend to group together, okay, mainly for security and safety, and maybe they know people from back home or their family friends and they can help them get a job and stuff like that. So they do that for safety, but it actually causes a lot of problems because the local people feel that the immigrants are taking over. So we're going to look at this purple bit here are the negatives, okay? It has meant that many, though not all, of these ethnic minorities have had to live in overcrowded, poor quality housing. So that's the first places the immigrants tend to go, is the cheapest areas. And then lots of them arrive, okay? Also, as we'll see, most immigrants tend to be quite young, between 20 and 40 years old. And that's the age a lot of people will start to have families. So once they arrive, they tend to reproduce and have kids. And if the kids are born in a country, then they have citizenship of that country as well. Okay, so if two people move to the UK and they have a kid, if the kid is born in the UK, it is automatically a UK citizen. All right. So overcrowding, high levels of unemployment, fewer education opportunities, leading to lower aspirations and less development of skills. So again, straight away you get this cycle of poverty. These people come in, they may not all have the support of the government, they can't get into good jobs, can't access education, they start having kids, and this cycle starts, okay? I've put in there not much help from the government, okay? While on one hand, authorities speak of a higher than average crime rate, especially violence and drugs, on the other hand, residents complain of police harassment, which together increase the lack of trust and leads to frustration and further tension. So it's this wicked cycle of where the police and government are saying, you know, these people in these poor areas, there's lots of crime and drugs, none of them are working, they're having lots of kids, they, you know, taking advantage of our country, whilst the local people actually say, well, we're being harassed and the police never give us a chance and the government don't help us out and we don't stand a chance, okay? This leads to lots of tension and fighting, unfortunately. But there are some positives. So last little bit down the bottom of the page here about the positives, alright? It has already been mentioned, it's already been mentioned that the West Indies were encouraged to come and work in Britain after the Second World War. So again, a lot of people from the Caribbean, mainly Jamaicans and Ghanaians and stuff, a lot of them moved over to the UK just after the Second World War in the 40s and 50s. Okay, without them, London's transport system, for one example, would never have been operational because so many of them worked in that. The National Health Service, it's called the NHS. Okay, it's free healthcare in the UK. It's like one of the most amazing systems in the world. Have come to rely heavily on skilled immigrants. All right, so nurses and doctors and care home workers. All right, loads of them. For example, my sister is an immigrant in the UK and she's a doctor for the NHS. Recently, migrants from several former European countries, especially Poland and places like that, Estonia, Lithuania, and so on, Hungary, Bulgaria, have been welcomed to fill gaps in the UK job market. Okay, the nation's culture and sporting life has been enhanced by the talents of, amongst others, musicians and sportsmen and women. So again, some of the positives is these people come in and fill lots of jobs. Okay, they also bring their own culture and languages. So England has huge numbers of different sports, foods, languages, music types, everything. Okay, and a lot of sports people now are representing the UK, so they benefit through that. All right. Also, just in culture, a good example is the Notting Hill Carnival. So I've drawn it out. It's a Caribbean Jamaican festival. Okay, it's held every August in London for 3 days, and it's an amazing big festival of culture all about the West Indies. Okay, now, however, there's been a big debate and argument about these people who came over from the West Indies after the Second World War. They were asked to come over by the British government because the British still owned some colonies over here, and they were told they'd have benefits if they moved over and they'd be allowed to work and all of this. But recently England went back on its word a little bit and said that they wouldn't recognise those people as citizens, and the people who'd moved over and have lived there for 40 years were literally told, right, so we've no rights anymore. So there's always ongoing issues here. But that's our positives and we've done our negatives, okay? In the next video we'll look at California, alright, and the issue of people coming in there. Alright, page 1331.